Hi, chess fans. We're looking at the game between Jakovenko with white and Dubov with black. The game was played in the Russian Super Cup 2018. This video contains 8 training questions, or rather 9 training questions to help you with your chess. So white played d4, and after knight f6, c4, c5, d5, e6, knight c3, e takes, c takes, d6, e4, g6. We have reached the Benoni position, and training question number 1. What are the main moves in this position for white? This is a theoretical position and white has a number of plans. One plan is to play f4 and push the pawns right away, and after bishop g7, bishop b5 check. Black has to play knight f to d7, and after a4 castle, knight f3. White plans to castle and has a strong center. Alternatively, white can also play knight f3 right away, and after bishop g7, e2, castle, castle, rook e8. White's plan is to fortify the e4 pawn with the 2 knights and to push for f4 and a4. Yet another plan is to play bishop d3 to protect the e4 pawn with the bishop right away, and after bishop g7, knight g2, putting the knight behind the bishop, and after castle, castle, the idea is to play the knight to g3, where it protects the e4 pawn and supports the f4, f5 push, and then to play f4 and a4. So there are lots of plans. Another plan is to protect the e4 pawn with f3, and after bishop d7 to play bishop g5, and then queen d2 with the idea of exchanging the dark square bishop, the strong one, on g7, and to develop the knight on g1 via e2 to g3, and then also push a4 and then decide where the light square bishop goes. Jakovenko, however, played in this position h3. The idea is to protect the g4 square, to take a few squares away from this bishop, which doesn't look very good right now. And after bishop g7 to play knight f3. So the pin is not possible. Black has a little time to develop, and black played a6, and after a4, knight b7, bishop d3, knight h5. In this position, white played bishop e2, and training question number 2, what is the idea behind this move? So it's a little bit of an anti-f5 move. Black has played the knight to h5 to make room for an f5 push later. So for example, if castle, white would castle now f5. White has the resource knight to g5, eyeing the e6 square where it's protected by the pawn, and at the same time unleashing an attack on the knight on h5. So this was the idea behind the bishop e2 move. So that's why in this position, after bishop e2, black played knight to e5, questioning the knight right away. And now white wins a pawn after takes, 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 g takes, queen takes. Training question number 3, black went into this line. So what is black's compensation for the pawn in this position? White is a pawn up, and after queen f6, black is pressuring the c3 knight. And for example, if black takes here with check, takes, queen takes, is a strong attack. At the same time, this file here, the g file, is open, so the rook is ready to swing over as well. While white is a little bit underdeveloped, the king is in the center, and black has good compensation for the pawn. White plays queen f3 to protect the knight and also question the queen right away, and after queen takes, g takes. Black's compensation is that these pawns look very weak, and in the long term, white does have a space advantage, but in the long term, black will try to capitalize on the fact that he has the bishop pair, especially this bishop here on c8 doesn't have a light squared counterpart. It is at the moment caged in by white's pawn a little bit, so a lot of the question in the game comes down to, will black be able to make use of this light square bishop and attack these pawns? Game continued f5, and training question number 4, with the resources of black in mind? What is the purpose behind this move? So after white's knight to d1, the idea is of course not to take here, because that would help white get rid of his weaknesses. But the idea is to play, and this is what happened in the game after rook f8. Black is planning to push this pawn forward, and after bishop h6, rook g8, bishop d2, f4, Black's idea behind the f5 move was to fixate these weaknesses here on the pawns. The rook is coming in, the bishop is coming in, the other rook is maybe also coming in at the same time. These pieces look a little bit not active at the moment. Also, this rook still has a long way to develop. It's currently blocked by the knight. The king has to move up, so black has a good plan here. Game continued, bishop to c3, very interesting maneuver. White's pieces are a little bit caged in, so white seeks to exchange some pieces. So bishop g7, bishop d7, takes, and now white plays b3. Now, given what we discussed about white's black's plan and white's weaknesses, what is the idea behind this move? It's actually a very strong move and a very instructive move as well. The idea is that after king e7, connecting the rooks, white plays knight to b2. The knight is moving to the d3 square where it protects the pawn on f2, and at the same time the king is ready to move up and white is ready to connect the rooks. So b3, very, very interesting move. And the game continued after b5, king to d2, rook to g2, the rook tries to invade, knight d3, defense, king d6, rook ag1, takes, in this position, rook c1. White is trying to generate some counterplay. The game continued b takes, bishop takes. So black has won back the pawn. It's now 5 pawns versus 5 pawns. Well, white immediately wins back the pawn here as well, so white is still a pawn up. Bishop d7, rook c1. Now in this position, what move would you have played? Training question number 6. What is the idea behind this maybe a little bit funny looking move, rook a1, rook to c1? So black played rook h2 and white played h4. And the idea behind rook to c1 is that if now black takes, white plays knight to b2, and the idea is to move the king over to protect all these pawns, which are very, very stable. And then to move the knight and the rook to a1 and to c4 here with a check. White is immediately threatening to give a check and win this pawn. White's idea is to play against these weak pawns. So that's why black didn't take, but instead played rook g2, and the game continued, as we can see here, a little bit back and forth until white tries to activate the king. And in this position, black takes, knight to c4 check, bishop takes, king takes. Training question number 7. How do you evaluate this ending? Who is better? Who's worse? Which side would you rather pick? Okay, the position is equal. It's very hard to say who is better here or who has an easier play. After rook h3, black is trying to attack these weaknesses here, and white is trying to attack the weaknesses on a6, e5, and h7. Maybe white has a little bit more comfortable position because black's pawns are just a little bit disconnected, and if you see already here, black actually has more weaknesses than white. At the same time, black also of course has 2 passed pawns, so white has to be a little bit careful. Game continued, rook to a2, so white is happy to give up the pawn on f3. Rook takes with check, king d7, and now in this position, rook to a7, rook king d6, rook a6, king d7. All right, so white has the plan, white has the option to, take this pawn. or white also has the option to attack and win this pawn. So training question number 8. Would you rather take the h7 pawn or the e5 pawn? So very interesting. Jakovenko chooses to take the e5 pawn. You might think that, okay, this pawn here is a passed pawn, so I'd rather go after this one first. But white actually decides to take the e5 pawn, and we will see in the game why. The rook takes, rook to a2, rook f5 attacking the pawn, rook a4, moving the pawn forward, protecting it. In this position, white still has all the time to attack this pawn. For example, white can win the pawn now right away with a check and then take the pawn. But by taking the e5 pawn earlier, white has now strong counterplay and activity himself. And we will see why this is stronger and why taking the h7 pawn would have probably just been a draw. Then continued e5, so white is immediately mobilizing his pawns. The rook a4, the king is just approaching the rook, so the rook cannot give any more checks from the side. In this position, rook f7, e6. White doesn't even care about this pawn for now. This pawn cannot move forward because white would take it. So the rook fulfills the double function of making sure he has an eye on this pawn, but also caging in the king. And as we will see, this double function is what gives white a winning position in this game. Then continued rook to e3, and the king moves into c5. And here white resigned. So last training question of this video, training question number 9. What is white's winning plan? Why did black resign in this position? So let's have a look. Let's say black pushes this pawn h5. White's winning plan is to play king e6. And in this position, the king is very safe. It takes the rook 2 moves to give a check, and then the king, can go to safety again, and it takes the rook more time to give checks. And at the same time, in this position, let's say black moves forward, white has the powerful mating motive. So it's very often when you have 2 connected passed pawns and they are connected with the king that you have this motive. So black needs to move, which for example allows white to win this pawn. And now this pawn cannot move forward because of this double attack. And black cannot do anything. So if black, for example, plays the rook over here, white also immediately wins or threatens to win the pawn. So if the king moves forward, white can simply mobilize his pieces and end up winning the game by pushing the pawns forward. And if the rook doesn't go away, white can at any moment stop this pawn and push these pawns forward. And no matter what black does, what black does, he cannot stop this plan. All right, and that's why in this position here, black resigned. So I hope you enjoyed the game and learned a lot from the 9 training questions. And I hope to see you back here again soon.